Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And hello, I'm Shalsa Midina. I'm from local 82, 2002, and my last NPM number is 23. In this video, I will present about a journal. This journal is about the curriculum difference between Indonesia and Australia. So, the title of this journal is The Comparison of Education System in Australia and Indonesia. the the authors are there are five authors, and they are Sri Marmoah, Roslinawati Roslan, Miratu Kairoh, Mutiara Dana Elita, and Muna Fauzia. I got this journal from um, online journal called ejournal.andiksha.id. So, about the introduction, the thing that made this research pretty unique is because the author stated that in this era, everything has changed, and so do the education system. Um, so they want to do a research about knowing deeper about the differences between the educational system differences between Indonesia and Australia in this era, the 21st century era. So the underlying theories. So there are so many underlying theories on the introduction, but I will quote two theories that are related to each other. The first theory is over the past 20 years, increasing globalization has focused on comparative international education and how different countries are approaching similar education problems, according to Ada Gordiswana Ulfatin and Supriyanto 2019. Related with the first sentence or the first theory, the second one is many educators and education systems today care to equip their students with the knowledge, skills, work habits, and characteristics that have come to be known as 21st century skills, according to Sulistiarini and Sabir in 2020, Van Laar, Van Dersen, Van Dijk, and Dehan 2017. So, the relation between these two theories is that um, the 21st century has started since 20 years ago, and when this century has started, there are some increasing globalization, and this thing is focused on comparative international education and how different countries are approaching similar education problems. So, from this statement, we can indicate that we can indicate that globalizations make many countries create their own educational system that are not similar, or they are different from one to another. If we see some similarities in those education system, it is just like the slightest part of it, not like the entirely or almost half of it. So yes, every country's educational system is different, and in this article, the authors are the authors conducted a research about the difference between Indonesia and Australia's education system. So, about the method, um, these these authors use don't use like the quantitative method or the qualitative method, but they did literature review. So, how they got the data is not from Google form, questionnaire, interviews, or maybe pamphlets and etc. But they did a lot of research of this topic. They get they got the sources from magazines, um, news articles, journals, library studies, and books, and the other reliable sources. So, um, with these sources, we can trust the validity of this data that is included in the journal. And next, about the findings and the results. So for the results, here there is a table, as you can see, up and down. So I will explain first. Before we go to the table, which is it is on the first part is about Australia. This whole table is about Australia educational system. So in Australia, there are two parts of territorial area, and the first is the Australian Capital Territory, and the second one is in the other parts of Australia. So I don't really have any idea about this territory, but recognizing from the name Australian Capital Territory, so it's like the big cities in central of Australia that are related to the governmental things, just like that. And meanwhile, the other parts of Australia are the cities or the areas um, between it or around it. So for the first table, it's about the classification of education in the Australian Capital Territory. So in Australia, there are two types of education. The first one is basic education, and the second one is middle education. And then for how long the students have to go to school. For the primary school, the length is 6 years, and for junior secondary school, which belongs to middle education, is 4 years, and for the senior high school, which belongs to middle education too, is 2 years. So in total, um, the students go the students spend 12 years for education. For table 2, about the classification of education in the other parts of Australia, for the basic education and middle education is the same has the same name like the education in the Australian Capital Territory, which is primary school, junior secondary school, and senior high school. But the difference is here the length of education. For primary school in the other parts of Australia, the students have to go to school for 7 years, for primary school for 7 years. This is 1 year longer than the Australian Capital Territory. And then for the next is junior secondary school for 3 years, which is shorter than the ones in Australian Capital Territory. And then for senior high school, it is the same as in the Australian Capital Territory, is 2 years. And about the curriculum, the government has made a certain frameworks of how the curriculum should be, and they give the they give the opportunity to each school to improve or to develop their own syllabus. So in conclusion, the educational system in Australia, especially for the curriculum, is not the same as the others. For example, school A has a specific curriculum, meanwhile school B has the other kind of curriculum, um, but the field is still in the same. They are still under the same framework, but the materials or the theories or the methods are different because they are free to modify it. And next, for Indonesia, and then for Indonesia, as we can, oh yeah, sorry. And also in Australia, the compulsory for students to go to school or to take education is 10 years. And in Indonesia, it is 12 years. So Indonesia has longer compulsory education length. So, and next is Indonesia classification of education, just like Australia. Basic education is primary school, and middle education about junior secondary school and senior high school. But the length is for primary school it is 6 years. For junior and senior high school are 3 years of each level. So in total there are 12 years of compulsory. Unlike Australia, which has 10 years compulsory, Indonesia um, Indonesia Indonesia says that students must take at least 12 years of education. So it means that if we like it or not, we have to go to all these stages school, from primary school to senior high school. Meanwhile, in Australia, it is enough for them to take only primary school and junior high school, because even though the duration is different from each territory, but if we calculate both of the length, it is still 10 years. So, and the next is about um, the the conclusion. So in conclusion, we see pretty much differences between the educational system of these two countries, and one of it that I haven't mentioned before is the teacher's classification. In Australia, a teacher must get their master degree. Meanwhile, in Indonesia, if someone has only a bachelor degree, they can teach students. It means that the requirements for Australian teachers are higher than Indonesian, because because they see that the quality of someone's self and someone's way to educate the others is from their the education of themselves. So yeah, higher education higher education higher edu- higher educated teachers will produce higher educated students. And my point of view of this article is, for the first is the weaknesses, oh sorry, the strength. The strength is, let's go to Australia first. The strength is that the teachers have high quality requirements and have a high quality um, and have a proper experience, because they get their master's degree first. And also the schools are free to modify, are free to suit or to adjust the curriculum, the syllabus, but still under the framework that the government gave the schools the materials. And for Indonesia, as and for in Indonesia, the compulsory and the the syllables are equal, so there is no difference of each school, which means it's a good thing, because we see now, in Indonesia it's kesenjangan. Um, for example, school A has a more complicated syllables than school B, so their rank on the school popularity is like this. One is too high and one is far below. And for the weaknesses, um, for Australia, the length of each territory areas are different from each other, so it will be such a hard thing for a student if one uh, took took education in the other part of Australian, and and on the and when he or she still learning in the education, but he or she has to transfer to another school, but it is located in the capital territory of Australia. So he or she must adapt to the curriculum, to the new schools, and also to the length of education, which is pretty complicated for especially for young learners. And the next, about Indonesia, the quality of teachers in Indonesia is pretty pretty much too far below Australia, because the first is the teacher's qualification. And also I want to add the other thing, that in Australia They did the final assessment called NAPLAN, NAPLAN test, and this test focuses on assessment, literacy, and numeracy programs. Meanwhile, in Indonesia, if if you want to go to higher level education, except for university, you have to take national examinations, and this all happens to all schools in Indonesia. And also, my suggestion is about that um, schools in Indonesia may take references from schools in Australia about the qualification, the requirements, both for the teachers or students, and like the tests and the syllabus, maybe, because as we can see, Australia is more um, is more adept in this field, proven by proven by the students of the country. And I think that's all from me. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.